But today, we have a very important mission, which is to educate you about a law that was just passed for the village of Key Biscayne about the use of single-use plastics in our facilities and our events, with the hopes that it would be extended to the residents and the businesses here on the Key. But first and foremost, it starts with us. So Rumya is here to let you know about the changes, educate you, give you options, resources, and if you have any questions at the end of this, we are here to answer them. There are changes coming to the way we do business here at the community center. It is not going to be very popular, but there are changes to our coffee service. And I have been telling those of you who I run into about this. There are changes to what we use to serve and what we use to eat and things like that. That's internal, and we are working to make sure that we comply with any and all regulations. So, Ramya?
It is good to see all of you here today. Thank you guys for coming. For those of you that don't know, although I think pretty much all of you do, my name is Rumya, and I am the Director of Environmental Science for the Key Biscayne Community Foundation. Most of the time, I'm here introducing one of our guest speakers. Today, I will be your speaker. And even though you all know who I am wearing a name tag because there's a stain on my shirt. And I don't want that to show up on the camera, in case you were wondering. What I'm going to talk to you about today is our program, Plastic Free KB, and then I'm just going to kind of explain what we're doing with the program a bit, and then what the village is doing, and then I'm going to spend more time kind of talking to you about the plastic problem and what you guys can do, how you can change your lifestyle, and any actions that you guys can take. Learning to live sustainably with Plastic Free KB. The Plastic Free KB program, we kind of started it 2 years ago. It was a very slow rollout. We did more with it last year. The entire point of this program is to completely eliminate the use of single-use plastics in Key Biscayne. We're doing this by partnering with local environmental groups. And then also we have a 3-tier certification program for businesses that they can join the program and eventually stop using single-use plastic. For a lot of them, it's not going to necessarily happen overnight. It's not the easiest change to make, but it's not impossible either. And so that's what we hope to do, is work with them and show them how to stop using single-use plastics. And then also residents, of course. We want residents to join the program. So first, I'm just going to talk to you about plastic itself, how plastic is made, what the side effects of the production process are, and again, how you can work to stop using single-use plastics. This is actually an outdated graphic, but it still has some alarming numbers. 8 million metric tons of plastic goes into the ocean every year. Graphic is outdated. It's from 2010, so it's 15 years old. That number is higher now as far as the amount of plastic that enters the ocean. Now, that's not just the amount of plastic that's produced. That's just what gets into the ocean. We also obviously have a lot of plastic that stays on land. 100 million metric tons of coastal plastic waste is produced annually. 2.5 billion metric tons of solid waste, so that's not just plastic, but a lot of other types of waste, is produced around the world annually. We have created this very heavy dependency on single-use items, especially plastic, and it is becoming a really large problem throughout the world, and it's literally a plastic faucet that we have to learn how to turn off. I have a couple of videos for you guys, just because sometimes it's more interesting to see it in that form. This, again, is just going to kind of go over some of the statistics about plastic, and it has very alarming music just to make you frightened, I guess. As most of you know, plastic doesn't biodegrade, or if it does, it takes hundreds or thousands of years to biodegrade. I'm sure you saw some of those numbers in that video. 91% of plastic waste is not recycled. Plastic does contribute to climate change, and that is because if you look at the plastic production process, plastics are made from fossil fuels. Just like gasoline in your car is adding to the carbon problem in the atmosphere and contributing to climate change, plastic is doing that too because it is also made from fossil fuels. The first step of creating plastic is extracting oils, crude oil, and methane gas. Methane is used as one of the base components in certain types of plastic. And of course, you know, if you're looking at oil mining and things like that, you're going to have a lot of areas that are left with poor soil, damaged land. These are often become Superfund sites where you can't farm, you can't use them, it's just heavily polluted. An oil field that they've been mining for several years, it eventually becomes abandoned because it dries up, but that land is unusable because of the amount of crude oil and other like toxic things that have leached into the ground there where they were doing the mining. Fracking is the method that is used most often for extracting natural gas from underground. And there's a lot of controversy about fracking and not a lot of regulations, not as much as there is for oil mining because it is relatively new compared to oil mining. But they pump a lot of chemicals deep into the ground in order to bring out the methane gas or the natural gases that they're extracting for our use. And what happens to those chemicals is what is hotly debated because they're saying it goes down deep enough that it doesn't come back out and affect anybody. But there have been a lot of reports and a lot of studies that show that they're finding it in the water table, in people's water that comes out of their faucet. There are some really crazy videos online where people have been able to literally set the water on fire that comes out of their faucet because it has methane gas in it. Step 2 is refinement and cracking. Cracking is the process of breaking apart large hydrocarbon molecules into smaller pieces. So crude oil is made of hydrocarbon molecules, and that's basically carbon and hydrogen that are in these long chains of molecules, and they break them apart into smaller components, and then those components are used to make different types of plastic. And like I said, methane, which is CH4, 1 carbon atom and 4 hydrogen atoms, that is also used in a lot of plastic production as a component. Just the method that they use to break apart these hydrocarbon molecules causes a lot of different issues. So you have air pollution because it releases toxins. Methane gas is a toxin. You can't just like breathe methane by itself, it will kill you. But you're not likely to actually just breathe in methane anywhere. But as I said, it's at least toxic enough or big enough of a problem that it does contribute to climate change. And then there's other cancer-causing agents that you find in these hydrocarbons and the methods that they use to break them apart. Water contamination, obviously, and you have the toxic aerosols and the chemicals that are used to extract during fracking. Water pollution hazards, again, that goes back not just to this stage, but the previous stage, where a lot of these, the residuals, or during the process of extracting, you get a lot of pollution that gets into the water table. So the groundwater or surface water. And then soil pollution, again, there's the mining sites. But then you also, as far as the stage 2, it is a little bit less significant. You don't have as much as you would from like an oil mining field. But you can have spills and leaks of the petroleum from this stage. And then also there's a lot of these residuals from the stage that are not used and they end up being put in a landfill. And you have a lot of different types of pollution that can leach out of a landfill and into the ground. There's a lot of different ways that you have different types of pollution coming from these various stages of plastic pollution. One thing I do want to mention about methane and how I was saying it does contribute to climate change. We all know like carbon dioxide is what we always talk about, right? When it comes to adding too much carbon dioxide to the atmosphere, and then that causes, sort of the greenhouse effect. Methane is also a greenhouse gas, and my number is correct. I believe it is 12 times more potent a greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide is. So the next step is processing and manufacturing. They have all these now components that they've created by breaking apart the hydrocarbon chains. And now they're using those and putting in chemical additives And that's how they make these different types of plastic. So depending on the additive that they put in, you get a different type of plastic. So you could have a single-use plastic, like the plastic cups or the silverware on your tables, or you could have a reusable plastic or a more permanent plastic, like say a Rubbermaid bin or something like that. So it just depends on what additives they use, and that's how they make these different types of plastic. Again, a lot of these chemicals that they use in the process of creating the plastic, these are toxic. So if they have a spill of chemicals or something like that, that can be a huge problem. Once you combine these chemicals together with the components, it's no longer toxic. And they obviously do a lot of testing to make sure that they're not, giving you a toxic water bottle. But that doesn't mean that you don't still sometimes have issues. There are obviously a lot of studies that show water that sits in a plastic water bottle for a very long time leaches chemicals into the water. But in the short term, it is not toxic. And a lot of these additives have, like I said, ecotoxicological effects. If they get into the environment, they can cause a lot of problems. And this is just sort of a complicated diagram showing like where it can go. So you have these like little plankton and stuff that's eaten by like fish, stuff like that. And then that gets into larger animals that eat the fish, and it just kind of moves through the food chain like that. This is not just with the chemicals, this is also with microplastics. So, and finally, step 4, distribution and consumption. So this is where they've now created the plastic product, whatever it is, and they distribute that to, various warehouses, distribution sites, stores, whatever, and now it's being used for whatever the product was meant for. So plastic water bottles, or plastic buckets, or whatever it is that they created. And then that gets distributed and then consumed by us, the consumer. And just looking at this chart again, this is slightly outdated, it's 10 years old, it's from 2015. But this is where plastic waste annually comes from. And the number one, 141 million tons of plastic waste in 2015 comes from packaging. So when you get your box from Amazon, it's full of that plastic bubble wrap, or those giant bubble bags that they put in there, that kind of packaging, anything that they use for products that are mailed or just for whatever reason to keep it clean while being transported, whatever it is, that type of packaging is where the majority of plastic waste comes from, and that is entirely single-use plastic. I mean, some people save bubble wrap and reuse it later, but most people are not going to be reusing the bubble wrap that comes in their boxes, or when you unwrap a candelabra that you bought and you just throw that stuff away. You don't keep that. But then you also have textiles are quite a large area of plastic waste. A lot of other sectors, institutional things, transportation, building and construction. There's a lot of other areas it comes from, but the biggest one is packaging, and that includes things like single-use plastic. Since 1950, approximately 9.2 billion tons of plastic have been produced. 40% of that is single-use plastic. So it will not be reused, it won't be recycled. Now, to put that in perspective, a bottle cap is roughly 2 grams. 1 million grams is about as heavy as like a Volkswagen Beetle, about a ton, slightly over a ton, or 1.2 tons. A billion, and now we're talking about 9.2 billion, 1 billion grams is roughly the size, weight, or the weight of the Colosseum in Rome, 2 times over. So when you're looking at now 9.2 billion tons, and most of this is still around. It doesn't go away. 75 years, 1950, that's not that long. Plastic, depending on the type, can take, as I mentioned, hundreds or thousands of years to break down. And even then, it doesn't really biodegrade. It breaks into smaller and smaller pieces of plastic. Obviously, waste management is a huge problem, and we're really bad at it. Some plastics can be recycled, not very well. It's very energy intensive, and in most cases, it doesn't work very well. And finally, it's counterproductive, because if people think like, oh, I can just use this because it'll just be recycled, it doesn't change their mindset about using it. And so recycling plastic is just, it doesn't really work very well, and it's just not really the best idea anyway. Every year in Miami-Dade, we send about 6,000 tons of recyclable material to the recycling plant. Now, that's not just plastic, but that's everything that we send to the recycling plant that is recyclable. They recycle less than 15% of that. Most of it ends up going to the landfill. They can't handle the amount of trash that they receive at the recycling plant. And a lot of times the trash they receive is contaminated. So regardless of whether or not this cardboard box is recyclable, it's next to this trash bag that's full of like food waste that's leaked everywhere. And so now all of that has to be thrown away. So that is a huge problem. Miami-Dade is actually one of the lowest recycling counties in the state of Florida. 30 to 40% from Broward and Palm Beach gets recycled. They do a little bit better than us, but we're pretty bad about it. That's a good question. I don't know what that is. I think a lot of it has to do with how things are thrown away, because a lot of people will throw things into the recycling that's not recyclable, or that contaminates it, or they do what we call wish cycling, where they're like, well, this is still good. If I put it in the recycling, it will get recycled. But that's not how it works. Or they confuse things like composting and recycling, because in their mind, both of those are sustainable things. I'm going to throw my food in here because it'll get recycled or composted without really understanding what the difference is. And I think that's where a lot of it comes down to understanding and education. And I'm not saying that Broward County is like more educated than Miami-Dade County, but I think that is where the largest part of the problem is. However, why there's that big of a difference, I couldn't really tell you. I don't know why that is, but that does seem to be the case. For some reason, Miami-Dade is one of the worst in the state. And you would think we would be better because, we have there's so many initiatives here, and then a lot of people are so aware of, the coral reefs that we have, and we have beach cleanups all the time, but somehow it just somehow doesn't quite get there. Why avoid plastic? I probably don't even need to go over this with you guys. I assume that you know, but we're just going to cover it just so that, there might be something that you haven't learned before. Climate change we already talked about, and that's because of where plastic comes from. It comes from fossil fuels, and that in itself, mining fossil fuels adds to the climate change issue. Plastic pollution, of course. This is a picture that I stole from my sea turtle presentation. A lot of sea turtles eat jellyfish as their main staple. That is a jellyfish. That is a plastic bag. If you're a turtle, honestly, as a human, I can barely tell the difference. As a turtle, I would have no idea. And then you have, small turtles eat like little crustaceans, the little baby hatchlings. They eat little crustaceans, tiny fish, things like that, little bugs and things that you find in the water. And a lot of times, little tiny pieces of plastic will resemble that. Our landfills are overflowing. If you look at pictures of South Florida from 100 years ago, it is flat, totally flat. You don't see any hills, nothing. Now you go around and you start seeing these hills in different places, especially off of highways. Those are landfills. And it's because there's so much trash, it is piled up so high. And from the outside, it just looks like a grassy slope, but that's because they don't want you to see all the trash that is in there. You can usually tell because there's going to be buzzards and things like flying above it. Sometimes they stink, not always. But that's a lot of those hills that you see nowadays. It's not part of the landscape. Those are landfills that have been created by people. There's a lot of health effects. I'll talk about that briefly after this. And of course, I mentioned already danger to wildlife. So I only talked about turtles, but obviously plastics affect anything that lives in the wild. They get tangled in it. They eat it by accident. You saw in that first video, they showed a dead bird, and it was entirely full of plastic. And what that is not just a bird that's eating plastic by accident. A lot of these birds will feed plastic to their chicks because they think it's food. And so then their chicks end up being full of plastic and they starve. And they just, they can't tell the difference. And sometimes the plastic smells like food because of whatever it's been used for. And, they don't know any better. They don't create plastic. They don't understand how it works. So it really has to be up to us to make that kind of change. Plastic bags look like jellyfish. Turtles get confused and eat them. This is all the tiny pieces of plastic that was found in this hatchling turtle stomach. It passed away, and that was found after a necropsy. And that's what happened. It can't be digested. There's no nutritional value, obviously. It sits in their stomach. They can't pass it. They feel full because their stomach is full, so they don't think that they're hungry. And then they end up starving to death with a stomach full of plastic. And again, not just turtles, this happens to birds, this happens to a lot of different types of wildlife. Now, this is one of my videos from doing the turtle nest evaluations at Bill Bags. And there's no plastic really in this picture other than the tape around the nests. But I wanted to show this to you just to show how any small amount of plastic, just a plastic bag, could affect a hatchling just based on its size. Because you would never guess, looking at this picture, that there's even anything interesting in that picture. So imagine if there is just, a plastic grocery bag right in front of him, and he doesn't know how to go around it. It's half buried in the sand, so it's not really moving, and he just crawls right into it, Don't worry, he made it to the water. I watched him. I was out at Bill Bags this morning. Every Thursday morning, I'm out there doing turtle nest evaluations. And just this morning, as soon as I got on the beach, we stopped to check one of the nests, and in the dunes, the plants right behind it, 3 plastic bags right there, and plastic grocery bags. These bags showed no sign of being in the water ever. So they were brought to the beach by somebody and left there, and then they got caught up in the plants and were just left. And so that's the kind of thing that changing that mindset that people think, oh, it's fine because, oh, they have a ranger that goes out every morning and cleans the beach. And it's like, they do because they have to, not because they are just, they want to do that. Nobody wants to go pick up trash on the beach. That's not like a, fun activity for people. They literally have to have people. Okay, well, you enjoy that. That's good. I mean, it is good if you do enjoy it because we need it. But generally speaking, they have rangers doing that only because they have to, not because they should have to. So health effects, I'll just talk about briefly. Microplastics are one of the biggest issues. There have been studies that show that microplastics have been accumulating in most human brains across the world, because almost all of us are affected by plastic. There's plastic in everything. That video at the beginning, it was a very sort of alarmist video, but it's not lying. There's microplastics in the air, there's microplastics in the water, there's microplastics in food. Now, most of it doesn't affect us. What we don't know are long-term effects because we're only just now realizing how much and how pervasive it is, and how much of it there is. So there was a study done recently, I want to say it was Nature magazine, but basically they looked at the amount of microplastics that have been accumulating in human brains, and it's not a good number. They also, the chemicals that you get from plastics have, are possible carcinogens. They could cause cancer. Respiratory issues, again, this comes from the breathing issues that you can get from being near plastic production or inhaling too much of the aerosol chemicals that come out of plastic production. Reproductive problems, and that really comes from what we found is that plastic that breaks down in the environment into smaller and smaller components. Some of these components start acting like endocrine disruptors, or basically hormones. Hormones that you don't want, extra hormones. And so what they're finding is that in animals, at least, they can behave like endocrine disruptors, causing not just reproductive issues, but also developmental issues, because you have these various hormones that you use throughout your life to, for reproduction, for growth, for behavior, all kinds of things. And so when that gets out of whack, because you have these other chemicals or other endocrine disruptors literally disrupting your systems, that then causes all of these different issues. This was something that came up when I was doing research several years ago. I was actually looking at pharmaceuticals in the environment and how they can affect the wildlife that lives within a certain environment. And those, a lot of them, they would also sometimes behave as endocrine disruptors. Sometimes they just behaved the way the drug is supposed to, but you're not trying to give a fish antidepressants, so that's still a problem. But what we found is that we would find microplastics or plastic components that have broken down in the ecosystem, and those are also acting as endocrine disruptors. As I mentioned earlier, packaging was one of the largest sources of plastic pollution. But again, it's not just packaging, but just single-use plastics in general. That is the biggest source of plastic pollution that we have. And it is 40% of plastic production is single-use plastics. But single-use plastics is 45% of the trash. So not a huge difference there, but still a huge huge area that without that, you can imagine like these kinds of things might be a little bit easier to address if that giant yellow slice there was addressed. Our goals for plastic-free KB, first of all, to join the Plastic-Free 305 program that the county started, which we already applied and have joined them. But also, obviously, outreaching to Key Biscayne businesses and residents. That is, we're looking specifically at Key Biscayne, and we should be able to do it here because it is a very insular community. We're an island, we're separated from everybody. It shouldn't be impossible. And there are examples of other small islands that have gone plastic free. Hawaii as a state is almost entirely plastic free. They've done an amazing job. But when you're not surrounded by everybody else who's using plastic, you're on an island, it shouldn't be that difficult to make the change. So we'll see. That's one of our main goals. Obviously, we want to educate everybody on how to adopt these different practices, how to live more sustainably, inviting everybody to join us, obviously the businesses and residents. Create a culture shift, because plastic has become a culture for people. Everybody is so dependent on plastic. And I'm guilty of that myself. I definitely have been. I'm always working on it. I'm not perfect. I'm not zero waste by any means. I order things on Amazon. I can't help myself. But you do the best that you can. And that is at least better than not doing anything and not caring at all. One of the hardest things for me was to stop using Ziploc bags. And I don't know why that was so difficult, but now that I don't use them, I get annoyed when people bring Ziploc bags to my house. Like, there are no Ziploc bags here, no plastic bags. We don't use those in my house. And, but you just use anything else, like small Tupperware, glass jars, anything. They all work just as well. There's no reason not to just do that. Yes?
They charge when you use a paper
They do that in
bag.
California, too.
I bring 4 or 5 bags, and I see people coming out of with Dixie with 6 plastic bags. I can get them in 2.
Yeah, we'll talk about that more, but I do agree with you. Did you have a question?
No, I just wanted to know what your alternative to the Ziploc was, and you said Tupperware,
Oh, yeah.
which no longer exists.
Well, okay, Tupperware is the slang for whatever, any small container, basically. It's not ideal because, yes, it is plastic. However, it is at least plastic that you can reuse over and over and over again, and you're not really adding to the problem. Eventually, yeah, it would be better to just not use any type of plastic, but, that's a very difficult prospect. But at the very least, if you're not adding to the problem by constantly throwing out single-use plastic, because as I said, that's 45% of the problem right there. So at least, avoiding that. Yeah.
The industry creating those plastic bags for supermarkets is the real political problem. They have a lot. We tried. I have a friend that we did right, and we tried to lobby, but it was very difficult. Some countries, in Argentina, for example, you don't give you bags at all. You go to the supermarket and you get your own.
Yeah, no, and that is entirely possible because you go to Costco and they don't give you any bags, or Aldi.
At all. Either you bring them or you don't.
It's not impossible, but it is a very difficult industry to fight.
Last year, the year before, who spoke about plastics and the environment.
Yes, Repair the Sea.
That's it. And
Rabbi-
at that point,
What was his
I
name?
said, up in New Jersey and in New York, there are no plastic bags. Why is it that other states have it? And he said it's a law for the
Right,
state.
we're going to talk about that. We'll talk about that.
Wonderful.
I thought, go ahead.
Plastic straw, they've changed, so it's the same thing as back to home and charge, or we have to include recycle.
The plastic straws that most places use on the Key are biodegradable. So you can throw them away, they will biodegrade, and they cannot be recycled. They biodegrade, so you can compost them or you can throw them away and they'll biodegrade, but they're not harmful to the environment. Yeah. So yeah, you don't need to, they can't be recycled, but you could bury it in your backyard and it'll biodegrade. We have different incentives that we're working on to get people to want to join. There's a lot of different components to the program that we're working on to make it sort of more desirable for people to join, and businesses. For businesses, when they join, they start out as a tier 1, tier 2, or tier 3. So tier 1 is basically they have pledged that they will get rid of at least one single-use plastic item that they use. And they'll stay at tier 1 until they can prove that they have actually gotten rid of that. Once they've gotten rid of at least 2 single-use items, or single-use plastic items that they used to use, 2 or more, then they become tier 2. And then finally, once a business has gone entirely single-use plastic-free, they're tier 3. So, and that's obviously the highest tier. Now, this does not apply to reusable plastics. That, again, that is a much more difficult ask, and it's much more expensive to try to get around that. But at least if they're reusable plastics, you're not adding to the problem of, you know, the trash and pollution everywhere. But you have gotten rid of all of the single-use items that are adding to the landfills and the pollution and the killing the sea turtles and all of that stuff. Yes.
Who is going to monitor whether that's happening?
So that would be us, me. The Key Biscayne Foundation. So we run the plastic-free program, and so we are the ones that are approaching businesses, speaking to them, speaking to residents, trying to get everybody to join. We probably won't monitor residents. In that case, it's going to be more of like an honor system. We'll just hope that if you say you're going to stop, that you will. But with the businesses, we will follow up with them annually and find out what they've been doing and if anything has changed, if they've moved up a tier, anything like that. And then for residents, all we ask from you is a pledge to join and try to live zero waste, try to live without using single-use plastics. It doesn't have to be an all or nothing thing. If you just stop using one single-use plastic, that is helpful. And then maybe in a year, you try to get rid of something else. You know, it doesn't have to be immediate. It doesn't have to be everything all at once. But the point is you're trying and you're slowly creating new habits and a new culture and a way of living that does not involve single-use plastics. And that's really what we're hoping for. So one of the things that we hope to do is when we have enough businesses that have joined our program, that we can do a monthly draw for the residents that have joined, and they'll get a gift certificate for one of our plastic-free businesses. We'll give you a shout out on social media and tell everybody, hey, these 10 new residents have joined the plastic-free program, because the more you get that out there, the more other people kind of feel ashamed of themselves. And then hopefully we'll also join. And I'm in the process of putting together a sustainability kit that once you join, we will give you a sustainability kit that will have various things in it that kind of start the process of teaching you how to live more sustainably and stop using single-use plastics. And then it will also contain a lot of information and different things that you can look at in order to change, certain things in your lifestyle. Go ahead.
We talk about single-use plastic. We have, plastic cutlery.
I will talk about that, and that won't be a problem for much longer.
Hopefully not.
Well, at least not here. So, getting into different ways that you can live sustainably, there are a million different ways that you can do this. First, when it comes to the government, that is where we do run into some of the biggest problems. They have these things where they encourage what they call advanced recycling. Pyrolysis is something that has been making the news a lot lately for plastic recycling. And especially, it's funny, I just read this article recently where they're like, ExxonMobil is committed to the circularity of plastics. So we're not, we're recycling plastics. And they talk a lot about pyrolysis. And basically what that is taking these various plastics, heating them and breaking them down again into their base components, and then reusing that to make new plastic. And that's kind of how they package it. The truth is, when they do this, if you have 100 pounds of plastic, maybe roughly 20 pounds of that will end up being reused. Here you have a bottle that they've created in plastic, and 10% of that bottle is from recycled plastic. And that's not helping the problem. 90% of that is new virgin plastic. So, they're still doing the same thing. They're just kind of trying to greenwash it and make it sound like it is doing something, but it's not. Go ahead.
Here and everywhere. Now, replacing these plastic fork for a wooden one, like you had in the samples there, for wood, I'm just wondering, to save the planet, to make things in wood, for example.
They're bamboo.
Bamboo ones, but you have to cut things, so you have to cut the tree.
So it depends on the type of wood. Bamboo is generally grown and farmed and regrown. Bamboo grows insanely fast. So they will have entire bamboo farms where they will grow it, cut it down, it regrows by the next year. Uh,
Always confront.
yeah, no, exactly. We'll talk more about that.
I never knew when I was seeing the little plastic ones, like to do for the kids, and you can watch. I watch them anyway, but that is it. So it's safer to do the bamboo than to use the plastic.
I mean, it's not safer. It's more sustainable in that you're not now using single-use plastic, but you are still using a single-use item. So it's not ideal. It's better. But again, like I said, there's a lot of different changes that you can make. And when it comes to cutlery, I actually have something very specific for you guys. The general like reusing plastics, recycling plastics is just, it doesn't work very well. And so encouraging that is just not really the best idea. It is counterproductive. Of course, limiting and reducing plastic consumption, in places like New York, New Jersey, where they don't let you get plastic bags. So then, you're limiting that production, you're limiting that consumption of plastic bags. That is one of the best ways of going about it. However, when you're in a place like Florida, that doesn't work as well. The Village has passed a resolution very recently where they are going to stop using single-use plastics in village facilities. So as of June 1st, you won't have all of these single-use things that you have now on the table. Reusable alternative, we're working with them to give them sort of different options of what they can do. There are different companies that will actually bring you reusable items. Once they're used, they pick them up like once a week and they'll wash them on their own and then bring them back. And that way it's not a lot of extra work for everybody that works here at the community center trying to wash like 500 cups. So there's like different things like that you can do. But we're working on different options. But as of June 1st, any village facility should not be using single-use plastics, and that extends to any vendors that work with the village. They have to agree to not use single-use plastics for the events that they're hired to do. Again, this is only for village facilities. This does not extend to businesses. The reason it doesn't extend to businesses is because it can't. Florida has a state law that bans municipalities from banning plastic. So, yeah. And what this comes down to is money in politics. So you have, the plastic industry has a very, very strong lobby, and they, really push these ideas that, if you like ban plastics, like people will lose their jobs and all the, whatever arguments they make. But basically they have pushed hard enough that the state government has decided that they cannot allow anybody in the state to independently ban plastics. There are a few things that Miami Beach and I think Coral Gables have managed to ban, and that was because those were put in place before the state ban went into effect, so they're kind of grandfathered in. But, Coral Gables still has plastic bags. They tried to ban them, and then they got sued by the state and they lost. So the plastic bags came back. I live in Coral Gables, and I remember the brief 2 months that we didn't have plastic bags, and it was great. But then they lost, and then they all came back immediately. That is the problem that you have to contend with. And so that's why the village can decide on their own that they don't want to use single-use plastic. They're allowed to do that. They can't then impose that on residents or on businesses. So that's where Plastic Free KB comes in, where we try to get everybody to voluntarily give up plastic. And that's really the hope, is that everybody will understand the importance of not using single-use plastic, how much of a problem it is, and that they will want to contribute to a better, cleaner future. The fact that the village has decided to stop using single-use plastics, aside from being an amazing step, a really, really good step, it's so helpful for me when I take my interns that I train in Plastic Free KB and we go around and we talk to the businesses, because we can be like, look, if the village government did it, you know how hard it is to make changes in government. If the village government can make this change, there's no reason that your business can't also make this change. And the truth is, eventually it ends up being better for them financially, because they're not constantly buying over and over and over again all of these single-use plastics that they have to keep replacing. In the immediate future, it is more expensive, because then you have to buy all of these reusable options. And those are more expensive. But over time, you end up saving money. And that's the important thing that we really try to get across to them.
About school programs, do you go into the schools?
We don't, but there are a lot of organizations that we work with. and they have a lot of school programs that work with the Miami-Dade County schools and any private schools that they can get an invitation to. And we'll talk to them about changing the way that they're doing things like that.
Went to the Key Biscayne Elementary School?
Yeah, I can, but there's only one of me. I just, so it's just a matter of like, I spend all my time, like in the summers is when I train my interns because that's the only when I have time to do that. And then we go around and school is out at that point, so I can't go in. And then during the school year, we have so much other programming going on that it can be really difficult to do that. But yes, I mean, if there was time, if I had more people that I would, volunteer or work with me on doing this, we could absolutely come up with a school program. Most of these stats are actually from Europe, so they're a little bit more optimistic than what you would find in the States. But generally speaking, 48% of consumers would change their buying habits if they knew that a company was reducing their environmental impact, meaning that they would want to buy more from that company. And so companies save money in the long run, not initially, but they do tend to save money eventually as they reduce their energy use, as they buy more sustainable products. They tend to retain more employees for longer periods of time. They don't have the same amount of turnover. And there are various reasons for that. The employees might be happier there. Because they end up, over time saving money, they may be able to pay their employees a little bit better. It's, there's a lot of different reasons, but that does seem to be the case when you look at the numbers, is that they tend to have less turnover. It increases business because, as I said, consumers tend to want to buy if they find out that you are a more sustainable business. That entices people to want to buy your products more. If they know that you're a huge polluter, a lot of people will boycott you, and that's obviously bad for business. It's one of the reasons that a lot of businesses try to hide that. And then, of course, it looks better for branding. The biggest problem that you find with these stats is that because these things are true, that people will prefer your business, it looks better and all of that, you have a lot of businesses that do what we call greenwashing, which is basically they make themselves sound and look like they are sustainable businesses, but then when you look at what they're actually doing, they're not. And figuring out who is actually making a difference and who is saying they're making a difference can be very difficult. And this is just a quick list. I'll leave this up for a minute if you guys want to take a picture. This is just a quick sort of idea of like what can be recycled and what should not be put in recycling. No food waste whatsoever in recycling. You should not, that goes in composting if it goes anywhere. It either goes in the trash or it goes in composting, but it cannot go in the recycling. One thing that is very important to remember that a lot of people don't realize is that anything that is contaminated with food waste can't go into the recycling. So while cardboard is infinitely recyclable, cardboard boxes that are pizza boxes are not, because they generally have pizza grease in them. And everybody tries to recycle pizza boxes. You cannot do that if there is any food waste in them or grease from the pizza or anything like that. And the reason is that they end up, like I said, contaminating the other products, but they also jam up the machines that they use for their sorting and everything because they get grease on everything and they get all disgusting. And so they literally have to stop like every hour to clear out the different types of plastic bags. Plastic bags are not recyclable for the same reason. But it's also the type of plastic that they're made out of. But they jam up the machines. And so they literally have to stop their sorting machines constantly throughout the day to unjam them from the gunk from food or from the plastic bags that get, tangled up in there. What was your question?
Well, I think there's a lot of people who feel like with composting, you can just throw in any food into composting. They have to understand you cannot put animal products in composting.
Right, yeah. So again, it depends on the type of composting and how they're doing it. There are some composters that will take animal products, but most of them don't. The one on the Key does not. So, there are certain things like that can make it more difficult. I have a product in my home, and I cannot remember the name of it, but I will look it up. I got it on Amazon. It was a bit expensive. I think it was around $300 when I bought it. And they call it a composter. It doesn't really compost, but what it does is you can put any food waste in there, including animal products. They tell you not to put like beef bone and stuff like that, but chicken bone is fine. But you put it in there, and you start it. And what it does is it heats it to a very, very high temperature over the course of like 6 hours. And when you open it 6 hours later, it literally looks like soil. It's not soil, but at that point, it is a compostable product. Or what a lot of people do is they use that for chicken feed. I don't have chickens, so I can't do that. But what I do actually is I take it, I keep accumulating it in a bag, and then I take it to my mother's house. She has a yard, and she does backyard composting. And so once I have my bag, and it doesn't smell like anything once it comes out of the thing. It's just like, literally looks like a bag of soil. And I just take that to my mom's house, and then she composts it in her backyard composter. Go ahead.
Recycling place in Midlands where the Home Depot is, and there's one. And I go there once a week with two bags, and I recycle there. So if anybody wants to do well, no, it's a lot of work, and it's a lot of waste of my time driving there and all
No,
that.
and that's actually one of the bigger problems, right? Is that people are like, I don't have time for that kind of thing. And it becomes a problem when you can't get things recycled properly, or your building doesn't do recycling.
Why don't we have something similar in Key Biscayne?
I don't disagree with that. That would be up to the village, and it would probably depend on the cost and what they can put into that. But yeah, I mean, I don't disagree. I know that, Helena from a zero waste culture tries to do what she can. She has a glass recycling bin that fills up super fast all the time. They empty it once a week, but I think it's at the farmer's market is where she keeps it. But it takes glass recycling. And then for a while, she did have electronics recycling, but I'm not sure if that's still going on anymore. You have like these smaller organizations that are doing what they can, but it does need to be done on a larger scale. And this is where it comes into like, if people can at least start changing their culture, then it becomes kind of a bigger movement. And then you have more of a voice when you're talking to, say, at a village council meeting or something, and you're asking like, is this something that we can get on the Key? Because there's a huge need for it, and there's a huge number of people that want it. Yeah, I mean, there would have to just be changes in the way that things are done, and I can't speak to that. It depends, like the trash chutes in buildings is just one chute for everything, right? So again, that just comes down to, if you were doing it on your own, like she is. Then maybe for a while the only way it gets done until enough people are doing that it shows that there is actually a genuine need for that. And then you have like more of a change, and then you have a larger sort of, like I said, a larger movement to push for these kinds of changes.
In the condos for the shirt, other than a plastic bag, because I'm trying to think, what would I use if I didn't use a plastic Winn-Dixie bag or Publix paper bag?
I mean, if it's just trash, then you might as well use a plastic bag if that's what you have. It's hard to say. When I go to the grocery store, if I forget my reusable bag, I always get paper bags while I'm there, and I use paper bags for my trash, for my recycling and for my trash. Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, I make sure that I get them, because they always have them somewhere. They just sometimes don't want to get them, but they always have them. And I have run into resistance where they're like, oh, I don't have any at my station. I'm like, I'll go grab them from the next station for you. I know you have them in the store. I'm not like, don't give me a plastic bag, and you just kind of have to be pushy about it. Yes.
All right, I have, trying to be conscientious, a stack of bags that I, the ones that close, because I wash and reuse and wash and reuse. So now, if I want to get rid of all of those, where do I put them?
There's not any really good way to get rid of them, unfortunately, because they're not recyclable. And, I know that sometimes you see outside of a Publix or somewhere where they have that bin and they're like, oh, put your plastic bags in here and they get recycled. They don't. That's a big lie. They've actually done experiments where they put trackers, what are those, the Apple tags or something, like in the plastic bags, wrapped it up, thrown it in that bin to see what happened. And most of them just end up in landfills. They don't recycle those, because you can't recycle those bags. It's, again, that's another type of greenwashing where they are trying to look like they're doing something good, but you can't recycle those types of bags.
It's just for everything together.
They do.
And bottles, they don't even recycle them.
Yeah.
Zero waste or something like that.
Yeah, so zero waste does no glass recycling in Florida. There's no state sanctioned glass recycling. There are only 10 states in the United States that do glass recycling. A lot of them collect the glass and it doesn't get recycled. There are companies that you can contract with. Glass for Life is what a zero waste culture uses, and they do monthly pickups and expends. And that's really where it comes down to, right? But, if it's something that, everybody in your building, or at least the majority of your building, would want to do, then that expense could be like spread building wide, and then it's not a big expense. Instead of paying $300 a month by yourself for like the small amount of glass recycling that you're doing, $300 spread over, 200 units, that's a little over $1 a unit. You're not really paying, you wouldn't even notice that. Like you might lose that in your couch one day, So just depending on how it's done and what you need, it is a possible solution. But yeah, glass recycling, and the problem with glass recycling is that even though glass is very recyclable, it is heavy and it's dangerous because if it's broken, it can like hurt people. And it's very, very expensive because of the weight to transport it and recycle it. And ultimately it ends up being either you break even or you're in the negative. You don't actually make any money from recycling glass most of the time. And that's why most states don't actually do it.
Oh, no, but you did ask. Well, thank you.
Before.
Thank you. I was just wondering, so what happens, because I clean my glass things, for example, the spaghetti sauces and all, and I reuse them because I always.
Yeah, my cupboard is so full of glass bottles.
Horrendously. Now, for the glass, what happens when that glass that is not recycled? I mean,
Landfill.
Landfill.
It goes to the landfill.
It's not as dangerous.
It's not as dangerous because you're not going to have chemicals leaching out of glass the way you do with plastic. And I mean, if you take sand and heat it up to like 1,000 degrees, it becomes glass. You can, in theory, you can break glass down into sand, and that's actually what a lot of recycling plants will do with glass. Glass is not dangerous as far as that goes, but if if it's put in the recycling or put in the trash, it just ends up in the landfill. So it's not doing anybody any good anywhere.
For this instruction, and also, being part of the Rotary, thank you
Yes.
for coming to us.
Yes.
One of our committees is the Committee of Environmental. And in one point, we had a discussion about pharmaceuticals that you mentioned. The pharmaceuticals, the discovery that we got from Rotary International is Biscayne area, in the Biscayne water. They discover pharmaceuticals inside the water. And the pharmaceuticals are coming usually from the toilet of the people.
The majority of the pharmaceuticals in the water come from wastewater treatment plants. Yeah.
But the origin is ourselves putting our pharmaceuticals, our pills that we are not using, throw into the toilet.
It's a combination of throwing things down the toilet, but also what you take and is not broken down in your body and then comes out as waste.
The thing is, at the end of the day, those chemicals or those pharmaceuticals are going to the water. The fish are taking these pharmaceuticals, and we are eating these fish. This is the theory that I learned. Why I'm talking about this? The tip is very simple. Here, around the corner in CBS, we have a special box to throw our pharmaceuticals. Therefore,
The police station, I think,
the
also
tip is
takes
only
them.
one. Use it.
Yeah, there are a lot of places that are drug drops, basically, where you can drop off extra medication that you may have that you haven't used.
Same situation you have for the batteries. In the batteries,
The police station has a battery drop if you have old batteries that no longer work, because batteries are full of chemicals that are very bad for the environment. So recycling those at a battery drop is a better idea. You can throw your glass in the recycling. They will take it. It doesn't really get recycled. But if you decide to do that, don't put broken glass in there. And that's because it's a safety issue for the employees that work at the plant. It's not that broken glass is not recyclable all of a sudden, but it's just dangerous. Plastic that can go in the recycling what we do in Florida is they call it a narrow neck rule. So if you have a plastic bottle that has a neck that is narrower than the width of the body, that can be recycled. And you can leave the lid on it. That doesn't matter. If it's anything else, you can't recycle it. So like a plastic cup like this, you can't put in the recycling because it doesn't have a narrow neck. And I think it's because, and they make that rule because the majority of those plastic bottles are made from a certain type of plastic that I think can kind of be reused in some way. So that's why they made that rule, because that's the easiest way to distinguish. Because if you look at the numbers on the bottom of like plastic items, like nobody knows what any of those mean. So in this way, like they can get at least the majority of that type of plastic, because that's how that it tends to be used. But basically just assume that anything that's plastic can't be recycled. And when it comes to metal, it's really only aluminum cans. So like soup cans or soda cans, things like that. Not aluminum foil, that usually has food waste on it, more often than not. But it also can have other sorts of additives in it. Pots and pans, not recyclable. Screws, hammers, tools, anything that's like not an aluminum can, basically, is not really recyclable. I suggest if you have pots and pans that seem to be in somewhat usable condition and you don't need them anymore, donate them. Reducing your use of plastic can be really difficult. As I mentioned, changing from using Ziploc bags was a little difficult for me, but now I don't use them ever. And I don't even remember how much I used them before. It seems like a really daunting task, and it can be difficult, especially when you're so used to doing things a certain way. It's not impossible though. And even just single-use plastics like a bottle of soap, rather than using liquid soap that comes in a bottle, use bar soap. Because then usually those come in a cardboard box that you can recycle, and the bar soap doesn't leave waste. You just use it up and it's gone. So simple things like that, where you look at what is going to happen once this is done. What is the end result? Do I have something that needs to be thrown away that now is not going to be recyclable? Or can I change this in a way that I don't end up with an end product that is either plastic or is not recyclable? Yes.
One, when we go to a restaurant and sometimes there's a leftover and they give us a plastic container to bring home. If you're going to a restaurant that you know that you might not finish the meal, bring your own container. Bring your own container. That's going to save a lot of plastic. And the other thing is that there's a lot of chemicals in the paper, like napkins to Kleenex. There's a lot of chemicals that produce a lot of allergies. So instead of buying, white napkins, which is trees in the end, and with a lot of chemicals going into your body, like you say, use a cloth napkin. I know it's old-fashioned, but it's better for your health and better for the planet.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you're going to do laundry anyway. So you might as well just, keep that with you and just wash it with the rest of your laundry. It's not, any more difficult than like carrying around napkins that ultimately become trash. I just realized cloth napkin is right there too. It really just comes down to you just have to want to do it. And just that's the first step. You want to do it, and then just kind of go through your house and be like, okay, what small change can I make today? As I said, it doesn't have to be everything all at once. It doesn't have to be immediate. It can be slowly over time. But any change that you make, any change is positive, as long as you're getting rid of some kind of single-use plastic. They mentioned loose leaf tea instead of tea bags. There is a lot of plastic in tea bags. Tea bags are not recyclable. Because, food waste, but also the paper in tea bags actually has a lot of microplastics in it. I make chai because I'm Indian, and all of my tea is loose leaf tea. It's really simple, and I just have a strainer. Just boil tea with, in water, and you just strain it, super easy. And then I just dump the loose tea into my little composter thingy. So these are just some other examples. These are weird examples. I don't know why I put this slide in there, but the plastic containers in general, not great. If you have stuff that is reusable, just reuse it. You don't have to throw away your plastic Tupperware if it still is perfectly fine. It's just that eventually you would hopefully move on from using plastic. But again, reusable plastic is so ingrained in our culture, it's very difficult to move beyond that. But as long as you're trying to avoid the single-use plastic, that is sort of the main thing. And then other sustainable steps that you can take. Composting, which we've talked about. We have the local composting group, A Zero Waste Culture. You can always join them. You can reduce your consumption. Don't buy so many things online. I admit that I am guilty of this, and I try very hard not to. One, because it hurts my bank account. But also because that is a lot of carbon that I'm using to have that shipped all over the place. It's, half the time comes packed full of plastic bubble wrap, and it's just ultimately not really a sustainable thing. And I can probably just go to some local store and find something very similar. It's just, it comes down to convenience, and we become very lazy because we get used to this convenience. And we don't need everything to be convenient. It's not like the end of the world if you have to walk 10 steps or drive your car to the store or do something, Buying local is always a great idea because then you are cutting down on the carbon emissions from the shipping of all of these different things when you're buying stuff from overseas or from across the country or whatever. Occasionally you're going to find something that like you're not going to be able to find locally. That of course that's going to happen. But if you can change to buying things locally as much as possible, that will cut down your carbon footprint. And that's really what you want to ultimately do. Eating less meat, in particular beef, because they release a lot of methane, which, as we mentioned, is a very bad greenhouse gas. So that's always helpful. So less meat available, in theory, eventually less cows, fewer cows. Conserving water, we way overuse water in Florida. We're over-tapping our water table very, very badly. And we are in danger of drought sometime in the not too distant future because we overuse water. We have too many people that are tapped into our water table. Yes?
What do you use? Because the choice is buying a bottle of water in a plastic bottle or using tap water with maybe a Brita filter, which is not very efficient.
I have a filter. It's a carbon filter that I can change out the carbon. It's a separate like jug thing, but the filter in it is a carbon filter that I can change out. And carbon, I don't remember. I'll have to look, but I can let you know. I'm not sure.
I don't know that that's.
Yeah. I mean, Brita filters are also carbon filters. The problem is that they're encased in plastic, and that has to be replaced whenever it's used up.
I mean, I'm a little freaked out now because
Hold on, guys. We're almost done.
I use my water. I mean, I use the water for if I'm making tea, if I'm making iced tea. So it is unhealthy without a filter to use that.
The water in Florida passes like FDA inspection. You can drink the water. It's not really going to hurt you. I just don't particularly like it. I think it tastes weird to me. But so yeah, but again, it's not unsafe. It's not going to hurt you. They do actually. It is filtered water that they send to your tap. I'm not telling anybody not to use their tap water. I mean, there's a lot of things, right? Like if your building's really old, you might have old pipes and it makes your water taste weird or something. It's not unsafe. So you're not going to get hurt by boiling your tea in tap water. I do that sometimes when I'm being lazy, but I just personally don't like the taste of it. But once it's filtered, I like it a little bit more. I'm also notoriously bad about drinking water. So there's that problem also. So conserving water, supporting sustainable businesses for obvious reasons. Participating in cleanups if you can. They actually can be fun. It depends on the ones that you go to, but at the very least, you get a day out on the beach. And if you come to our mangrove cleanups, you get to be out on the water, which is super fun. And of course, advocate. And this comes down to, of course, talking to your legislators and telling them like, hey, I think the ban on plastic bans is stupid and you should change that. And again, if you get enough people that really, really push for that, that is possibly a change that can be made. And then it also depends on really pushing, looking at who you're voting for. What do they stand for? How do they do they care about the environment? What's their agenda? Just make sure that what is going on in your local government. So I'm going to end on two videos. It's a good story. But these are both stories about the same guy, the same beach. So this is Versova Beach in Mumbai, India. And I'll just let them explain to you what's going on. But it's a very, very interesting story. And it goes to show that it doesn't have to be that hard. This is hard. We don't have this. We don't have to deal with this. So, I mean, it's getting there, right? That's the problem because we haven't been able to turn off the plastic faucet. But we don't have this to deal with. What we have to deal with is infinitely easier to fix and to avoid this kind of thing. And so it's just better if we start making these changes now before we end up with something like this.
This is not a landfill. This was Versva Beach in Mumbai, India, a little over 3 years ago. It was covered in over 6,000 tons of trash. After what the United Nations called the world's largest beach cleanup, this is Versva Beach today. It was a movement started and led by one man, Afro's Shop.
My name is Afro Shah. I'm a lawyer by profession, and I love oceans.
In October of 2015, Versva Beach was little more than a dumping ground on the west coast of Mumbai.
There were 5.5 feet of plastic, and when you see so much plastic decomposed to the ocean, it's scary. It's very scary. We have devastated the health of our ocean. And garbage piled up either on land or in ocean is a big issue, not only in India, world over.
So Afros took matters into his own hands. He started picking up the trash himself.
I spent my childhood here. I used to play here, and the beach used to be very, very clean. For me, it was purely simple. It had to be my personal journey. Then I told myself it would be difficult for a single man to do it. So I said, why not take this personal journey to others? I provoked others to join in, and eventually we did join in.
Since 2015, every weekend, hundreds of volunteers join Afros to pick up the trash that has been strewn along a 2-mile stretch of the beach. And the volunteer work continues today.
We have been cleaning for past 112 weeks now, and it's almost 9 million kgs of plastic and filth out from the ocean. Beach cleaning is one of the biggest preventive action to prevent this plastic going into the deep sea. This is minimum we can do.
Through the use of trucks, bulldozers, buckets, whatever people can use, the beach has slowly been picked up. But the issue is more than just the beach. It's about the mindset of people. So, apart from the beach cleanup, Afros also works with local communities to help educate them on recycling and proper trash disposal.
We go to coastal communities where, the littering happens, talking to them. I go to people's garbage. I tell them, show me. Then I tell them how to segregate, how to handle plastic. This is the first creek which is entering into the ocean from here. I'm proud that I'm connecting with people and I'm connecting with nature. That gets a very big sense of pride in my heart, This problem of pollution is created by us. We have lost a sense of belonging to our planet and to our ocean. A lot of people ask me, Afros, how long are you going to clean? The day we say that this ocean is mine and it has to be spick and span, we will not ask this question. In fact, we'll go and provoke others to do what I'm doing. We are in for a long haul, and every citizen on this planet must be in for a long haul. Start doing your bit, what we are doing.
One thing that they kind of glossed over a little bit, they said he goes to local villages and talks to them about their plastic waste. Those aren't really villages, they're slums. So those people are essentially homeless population that created their own kind of little village out of whatever trash that they could find and created a slum. So you don't have like the government sanctioned trash pickup there because it's not a real like sanctioned neighborhood or village or whatever. So they don't have anywhere to put their trash. And that's why they end up in these situations where you have literally like a pile of trash 6 feet deep right outside somebody's house. They don't have anywhere to put that. One of the things he does, and and he has several videos on YouTube, but on another one I saw that he works with a lot of these villages, and there are certain types of these plastics, again, that can be recycled or reused in some way. And so he teaches them how to like sort through their plastic and find these types of things. And then he works with businesses that are willing to take in that plastic and they'll pay for it. And so now you have this very, very poor slum neighborhood that has a way of making an income. And so then they're much more careful with their trash now because they don't want to accidentally throw away something that they could use in this program and make money and hopefully better themselves. In a place like India, it's such a huge problem because their population is 4 times our population. And they live in a landmass that is about the third of size of the United States. So the overpopulation problem there, it's a very, very difficult issue to deal with. And then on top of that, because there's so many people, the facilities aren't quite good enough to be able to take care of this huge influx of trash coming from so many people. So you have to work and you have to try to come up with more creative solutions, a more circular economy, different ways of recycling and reusing, and then of course, ultimately, hopefully, reducing your use of plastic at all. Now this next video, and this will be my last video and then I'm done. This is again, Versova Beach. So this first video I just showed you was after 3 years, I think he said 127 weeks, so 2.5 years, whatever, that he's been cleaning. This next video is after, in his 4th year of cleaning Versova Beach.
The fact that olive ridley turtle located on the Versova beach is an indication that the ecosystem is regenerating in a very urban habitat, Mumbai, where around 20 to 25 million people live. Versova beach, which was considered the dirtiest, now has olive ridley turtle as its, the Versova beach is hosting olive ridley turtle. ये बीच बहुत ही गंदा हुआ करता था, अब क्लीन हो गया है तो एनिमल्स भी उसको बोल रहे हैं शाबाश अच्छा हुआ हमारे हैं. देखिए जो हम लोगों ने काम शुरू किया, मैं और मेरे वॉलंटियर्स इतने 127 हफ्ते हो गए मेहनत करके, साफ सफाई करते, फिर प्लास्टिक को समंदर से कैसे जाना रोकना, माइंडसेट चेंज कराना, लोगों को तैयार करना, ये तो ज़िंदगी भर चलता रहेगा, इट वोंट एंड, बट ये है कि जो भी सुन रहा है, मेरे को देख रहा है, सब लोगों को ये कोशिश करनी चाहिए. कोशिश ही हम कर सकते हैं, रिजल्ट ऊपर वाले पे छोड़ दें, और द रिजल्ट्स इज आउट ऑफ आवर हैंड्स, यू विल हैव टू वर्क हार्ड.
It just goes to show you that it is possible once things are changed, once you have made a difference, the earth can reset itself. Now, the truth of this situation is more likely that they have had olive ridleys nesting on this beach for centuries, and they said a dry spell of 20 years. What's probably happened is you had olive ridleys coming up on the beach to nest and were not able to, or they nested in the trash and the babies didn't make it out of there because obviously trash is not going to be a good place for them to be nested. And they don't know any better. Turtles go by instinct. Their brains are this big. They don't think about, what's going on as far as they're like, oh, I'm not going to nest here because there's trash. They may not because they don't like the feel of it. It doesn't feel like sand, so they might just turn around and leave and not nest there. But the truth is, the fact that after he started cleaning and now the beach is clear and now they had 80 baby olive ridleys that they counted, that's 80 is one nest, probably. But it is better than nothing, and it just shows that the turtles have probably been coming every year trying to nest, and they weren't able to until now. So it's definitely a step in the right direction, and it does show that they're still trying even after 20 years of not being able to nest because it was covered in 5 feet deep garbage. That is all I have for you guys. Before I go to questions, I do want you all to know that I brought for everybody a packet of reusable silverware. It's metal, it's not plastic or wood. So this is just a little packet that you just keep with you, carry with you. That way, if you come here, for instance, they wouldn't have to give you the plastic silverware, you have your own. So I should have enough for everybody. It's unfortunate some people left already, but I'll just take them back with me. So yeah, I have one of these for everybody. These will also be included when I finish putting together our sustainability kits that we're going to give to residents that join our program. There will be these and several other things in there that will start you on your sustainability journey. Thank you guys very much.